And we are live. What's up, Juan?
How's it going, Derek?
Pretty good. I met you pretty quickly, I would say, right? I've only known each other for the last like a few weeks, I think.
Yeah,
But we move in.
I think it's been a little bit less than a month. It just things just kind of got rolling here.
Yeah. Thank you to Jerry Chang here, connecting the East Palo Alto community to our model of our program. We're very excited about this one. The reason being is because nonprofit, nonprofit, organizations, we haven't had too many in our actual program. And what's interesting about nonprofits is that, there's a lot of need there, right, for students to support the transformation of those organizations, right? A lot of nonprofits are still kind of set in their ways and they're kind of sit into a legacy where, they're kind of immobilized when it comes to digital tools and so forth. And so we're super excited about this one because our youth, we have them do that futuristic stuff and can help maybe YCS out a bit. So yeah, I'd love to just talk to you about your story, Juan, and how you came to be over in East Palo Alto, YCS, and so forth. So give us some background on yourself and kind of where you came from and how'd you get here?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we only have like an hour, right? Because I can go like 20 hours about talking about my background. But
Please go in
you know,
depth.
yeah, for sure. But first of all, I just want to thank both you and Jerry, for making this opportunity available for youth community service and for myself to be here on this podcast to talk about the great work that we are doing here in the Bay Area. But I'll go more into like a little bit about me. So pretty basic. I'm the first generation, Mexican American. Both my parents grew up and were born in Mexico, and they did, come to the U.S. back in I want to say like the 70s, illegally, with the whole crossing the border story and whatnot, wanted to come to the US so that they could provide a better future for their future children. At the time, they didn't have any children, and ended up in San Jose in the Bay Area with a lot of their own family members, and kind of quickly started working at packing houses, Del Monte Packing House here in San Jose.
Yeah.
um, Eventually, the packing house here got closed, and so they had to relocate down to the Central Valley of California, and that's where I was born. So I'm actually one of the youngest of six kids. I'm a twin, so both my twin and I are the youngest, are the babies. And we didn't have the experience of growing up in the Bay Area. My older siblings did, however, I didn't. So I grew up in this small little town called Exeter, California, and
How far is that from San Luis Obispo? Because I went to San Luis Obispo for
San
college.
Luis Obispo. I'm gonna say it's about like 2.5 hours, and someone out there could probably like fact check me and Google me, and I mean Google it and see what the actual distance is. But I would say about two
Sure.
and a half hours. From San Jose or from the Bay Area. I say San Jose a lot because that's where I live now, and that's where I identify as being from now. It's my hometown to here is about 3.5 hours away, so
Okay.
still close
Yeah,
enough to go visit, but
that's exactly
not
how long it takes to get from my house or San Leandro to Cal Poly when I went back and forth. So
cool, cool,
yeah.
yeah. But it's really interesting that even living in the same state, or being in the same state, just driving 3.5 hours south from here, the difference in opportunity and the difference in diversity, inclusion, equity, right? And so I go back to, yes, I grew up in this very small town in Exeter, but almost immediately I found that there was less of an opportunity for me to be successful in life in general, growing up in this very small town. This town, I actually don't know what the demographics are now, but when I lived there and was growing up back in the 90s, was about 90% white. And I felt very uncomfortable as a person of color going to school there, just because um, And then plus also I think some of the of being first generation and my parents being from Mexico and undocumented and speaking Spanish at home, but then being told at school that no, you have to speak English only, and then this is like America, right? Like so, I feel like as a young
Mm.
person, I had this dichotomy of like okay, like what my roots and my culture and my people are are telling me and showing me who I'm supposed to be, but then this new you know, uh, environment, right? America telling me like, no, like you're supposed to aspire to be a capitalist and to be, this entrepreneur and like make lots of money and right, like, and so quite quickly, I felt myself very divided between like, okay, like, do I stay true to my roots or do I kind of like leave it behind and find a new identity. And it's interesting that that was my only two options that I had at the time, which was I fully embrace my roots or I kind of like cut off the roots and become something different. Right.
Mm.
There's no like middle ground or like gray area where like I can try to blend or fuse the two together.
And how
And
old were you? How old were you at the time?
when this all was happening, this is all high
Yeah.
school, man. Like when I'm
Oh
going,
man.
yeah,
Yeah.
this is all back in. I was still a baby, a teen, like like, and I think that like, so first, have that identity crisis with my culture, um, caused a lot of confusion, a lot of, but also at the same time, a lot of ambition, right? Because I wanted to like show the Mexicans, like, oh, like no, like I'm not gonna be the stereotype of a gangbanger, cholo, drug dealer going to prison, and I also wanted to show
Mm.
the white people that I was growing up around, hey, I can keep up with you and maybe even like outdo you and do better than you, right?
Yeah.
And um
Yeah.
so that's like the first complexity that I was dealing with as an adolescent, and then add on my sexuality and my sexual orientation, trying to figure out what that was about. That added even a more deeper complexity to the equation of like, who in the heck am I, right? Because
Wow. Yeah.
I'm this child of undocumented immigrants. I'm also a identify now as a gay man, and
Yeah.
so back then, even now, it's still super taboo to like be openly proud gay in the Latinx community, right?
Yeah.
Um, at least for people like who are grounded from like in the roots in Mexico, like people who are third, fourth generation, like they don't really care. But like my family predominantly still speak Spanish and go to
Yeah.
Mexico all every single right. It's really difficult to be openly proud in a gay man. Um, in most families, right? Today I don't really give a f, right? Like I'm who I am and I embrace it and I love myself for who I am. But it took a very long time and a very dark path to get to where I'm at. Um, so that's another obstacle, like
Wow.
right, that was kind of just thrown at me when I was a adolescent. And then lastly, um, there was a lot of mental health and substance use issues.
Yeah.
Um, in my whole entire family, including myself. And my father passed away when I was a young child from his addiction. My mother was an alcoholic and or still is an alcoholic. Well, she's sober and hasn't drank for a long time, but still identifies as an alcoholic. And all these different identity crises led to me also becoming an addict myself and led me towards this very dark path where I didn't think that um, I would be capable of doing the stuff that I'm doing today. And luckily, in my life, I have found recovery and I am a sober man now. And I do feel because of my sobriety that I have been able to really work on myself through all these different identity crises that I experienced as a young person, right? And have fully embraced my cultura of being a Mexican American, right? Of being proud of fusing the American perspective with the Mexican roots, and making sure that those are still there, right? Making sure that today I am a very proud vocal gay man, right? And then also talk about the importance of mental health and substance use issues, and how important that is to overcome, and to tell people that there is a solution to those issues, right? um so kind of fast forwarding to like kind of modern time, or to today, is I moved to the Bay Area because I said, like, the identity crisis of not finding any opportunity in the Central Valley. I moved to the Bay Area to go to school. I went to San Jose State, um,
Good choice.
where yeah,
Yeah.
it's a really great school. So shout out to San Jose State, go Spartans. And almost immediately found myself working in nonprofits, and started working with youth development. So I worked with the Y Silicon Valley for about 7 years as a program director there. Eventually found myself, moving to youth community service, YCS, here in East Palo Alto. And I've been with the organization for a little bit over 2 years, also working as a program director. And so I think I am gravitated towards nonprofit work, and especially working with youth, because of the lived experience that I had, right, as a young adult. I wish there were programs like youth community service. I wish that there were all an abundance of all these different nonprofits, trying to empower, all these different marginalized groups, right? And to tell people, like, hey, like, yes, your voice matters. It doesn't matter if you're suffering from mental health. It doesn't matter if you're struggling to identify in the LGBTQ community, right? It doesn't matter if your parents, have substance use issues, or you have substance use issues, right? Like, you can overcome. And so I think that's my favorite aspect of working with young people is, like, they look at me and they see this fancy title, right? This, like, like, program director for youth development, for youth community service. And talking to young people, it's really interesting what happens when they interact with me. They're like, have this, like, very professionalism, like, they stand up straight, and they try to use these big jargon words, and making sure that they're impressing me. And I'm like, you don't have to do that, right? Like, you don't have to do that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's it's just like, just be yourself, right? Like, just. And I think authentically, when people when they're their authentic selves, that's when you're able to make connections with other people, right? And build collaborations, partnerships, work on projects. And if only people could learn that as young people, and learn to be like, not really give a F and care about what other people think about them, and just be like, this is me, like, this is what I come to the party with. These are my cards on the table. Like, no, I don't know about podcasting. Can you show me? Like, instead of, like, trying to, like, BS your way through life, it's like, be honest, and, like, just bring what you know. And other people that do know that stuff will be more than happy to show you the way, right? And so I think that's where I come from. And I just want to show all these young people that I work with, like, hey, um, let me help you get to where you want to get to, like, because I also struggled, and I've been the benefactor of someone helping me, so now I want to help you.
Wow. Geez. Man, I don't know where to start there. So I affiliate with a lot of things you just said. Like, my dad swam out of China to Macau, flew here, and when I was going through school, I was, the Chinese kid, right? Like, we got the ching chongs and stuff, that stuff,
Yeah, yeah.
but we're on the Bay Area too, so it's kind of funny, right? So we all make fun of each other in the Bay Area, right? Growing up. And, growing up in school was just like this, Bay Area is very diverse. So you get all these diversities. But I always felt like, even when I was young, like, Cantonese is a very different language than English, right? So when you're hearing Cantonese when you're super young and you're speaking that at first because your mom and dad speak it, right? And your family speak it, you learn
Right.
that, and then you go into elementary school and people are speaking English, and it's all these different kind of people you start to learn, right, as a youth, to be like, what am I, like, who am I, what am I doing, at some
Hmm.
point, pretty much like up until I would say college, I disconnected from my culture intentionally, or
Hmm.
subconsciously and intentionally at the same time, right?
Right.
And wasn't able to come back to it until college, or shortly after college, even around during college. And so I just, like the cultural, yeah, at some point I didn't communicate with my mom and dad for a long time, uh connectively, emotionally, and all that. And I'm still working on that because of that disconnect, as a culture, right? And and then when I was 19, I went to, basically severe anxiety and depression. um when I first year in college, I started stuttering to my first my professor in architecture, and I was like, "What is this stuttering?" And then it just got, and that was partly because I was drinking a lot of red lines, like because I can't, I was
Yeah, maybe
I
that has something to do
so
with it.
so I got the Asian flush, right? That's what they call it, the Asian glow, they call it.
Uh
And so, in
huh.
college you're drinking, right? So I drink a lot of energy drinks, like hardcore energy drinks. So I call that substance abuse, I would say. But that, like, made my heartbeat super high, and I got anxiety. And then that, fell into depression. And then it got worse and worse and worse till I got anxiety attacks. And at that point, I was still discovering what I was interested in and what I want to do, while breaking down my entire self. And I put a percentage on who I was at that point. So I got to 5%, right? I completely broke down who I was to 5% in severe anxiety depression. And I knew I wasn't going to kill myself. Like, I knew that wasn't going to happen, right? But I was, it crosses my mind because of the pain, right? It's severe. And so at some point I had to get out of it, so I had to learn a lot about myself. Through I love astrology, and I love, like, numerology, and I love all these things where, like, I was the press kid, in a bookstore, in a Barnes and Noble, on the aisle, like pulling out
Uh
astrology books, learning about, like, who am I, like, what am I interested in, right? I started writing poems and raps and sketches, and just started creating. I started hacking myself, started talking to my, like, practicing my speech, trying to get out of my stutter, right? Be very specific with what I say, right? Type of thing.
huh.
I would do Brene Brown poses, like TED Talk type stuff, um,
That's awesome.
all really trying to get out of, or trying to get back to 100%, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And through no pills, no diagnosis, none of that, I was able to get out of it. And what's interesting is that, entrepreneurialism became my expression of myself. So I started a clothing brand about 12 years ago, a streetwear brand called Myth. And this is actually the logo of it. And it basically is a path to the unknown, right? And so the whole idea is to pursue your bliss, pursue your journey, pursue where
Hmm.
you want to, it's like departure, fulfillment, return, right? People depart where they're from to fulfill something of value, to bring back that knowledge to people, right? And I saw my journey in this light. And at some point, I adopted I was at some point I was figuring out, like, where does passion, perseverance, and purpose come in, and what's the order, right? So the order I came to was passion first, because passion allows you to gravitate towards the things that you love doing, and it's a natural, and so it just fits automatically, right? And given you have enough passion in something, right, there's going to be hardships that present itself, like the ones that you experience, like the ones that I experienced, right? You're going to go through hardship and issues that you have to break through the brick wall on. And that's perseverance if you can survive the passing of that brick wall, right? And so if you're able to love it so much and break through it and get beyond that wall, right, to persevere, right, you reach a state in which you know something that no one else knows. And that's what's really interesting about purpose, right? Is that's the formula that I've decided, right? I guess in a subjective way, passion leads you to accomplish things that are hard, and when you accomplish those things that are hard, you then discover who you are in a better way, and then you've discovered more about what you want to do, right? So I studied architecture, I not doing architecture anymore, I found my entrepreneurialism, and I went through that down the journey and was able to discover my hometown transforming itself into a city of innovation. And I met the chief innovation officer of the city, about a month after she got hired, and that spark of like seeing my hometown, transform itself, which this blank, boring city called San Leandro, right, it wants to do this big thing, and then me kind of departing, fulfilling, and returning, like it just connected all those dots for me, and I ended up just going ham on San Leandro, my hometown, wanting to build the future of my community, right? And so I resonate like 100% with what you're saying here, right? I'm not gay, but I had a gay roommate in college,
Uh-huh.
and and that was fun, right? Like, and so you get to this point where, you know, uh, and I ask myself a lot, like, why am I doing what I'm doing right now? You know, um, partnering with employers to scope out projects to win internships, well, the function of that is to enable our young people to discover more of their purpose earlier, right? So that they can actually achieve their best potential earlier, so that they can be enabled to build the future earlier, right? At their best potential, at their highest capabilities, so that they can actually go out back. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? Is because of what you're doing too. Like coming from that past, affiliating with that, and wanting to inspire other people to have that same format, right?
Absolutely. I think I wrote it down, the passion, perseverance, purpose. I think that's absolutely true. And if there is a way that you and I and other like-minded people like us, could, somehow like just take that information and just kind of like clunk it into like a young person and have them discover those three things earlier on, it I think it could potentially prevent the trial and error, right? Like, yes, that does need to happen for, I think, any person, for them to, go through trial and error of just life. But I think you're absolutely right. Like, part of what I do and what youth community service does is try to have young people find their passion, right? A lot of these kids that I work with, interact with, like, like, oh, I'm kind of interested here in, skateboarding or like tech or what, right? But they're still kind of discovering, like, I don't know, like my true passions are, right? And so what youth community service does is give them exposure to all these different opportunities, not only here in East Palo Alto, but like in the Bay Area, and hopefully maybe, the global community, where they're able to really, like, what, like, I really want to learn about, animals, and how like maybe environmental like rights when it comes to like saving the rainforest, whatever, right? And
Yeah.
so then sparking that passion and with it within that, so they can find a purpose in their future. But then also going back to the whole perseverance aspect, right? Like a lot of the young people that I have encountered in my experience working with youth, it's it's really cool when someone who is in middle school or high school see someone like me, see someone like you, right? And are able to really get intimate and share our stories of perseverance, right? Like I just did with you
Yes.
about like, my struggles in the past, and give them hope. A lot of these, especially now with COVID and with distance learning, and people like, being laid off, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of just hopelessness in the world in general, right? And especially in our young people, and to give, I think, anyone that story of like, hey, I had all these obstacles in my life, and statistically, I should be either in jail or dead or whatever, right? Like that's
Yeah.
what data shows and says that that's my result that I should be in. But in reality, I overcame, persevered, and worked through all those obstacles to get to the other side. And am I still working through those stuff? Absolutely, right? It's not all butterflies and rainbows,
Yeah.
but you know, it does get better at the, like, once you continue to work on not only yourself, but then also taking what you learned from within yourself and applying that to your neighbors, to your community, and to the world.
It comes down to like the things that we don't think about a lot, right? Strength and confidence and courage and interests and discovery and love and just all these fundamental things that people discover as they go, but they may not have a component, right, to persevere through that one, right? Or they may not have the interest to go through that one, to go through the hardship to get through that, right?
Mhm.
And one thing I want to ask you is this. Well, it's just really kind of a statement, and then I want to ask you something specific. But like, I think the principal of a Royal High School in San Lorenzo. But we asked the anxietal question to students like, "Hey, what do you want to be when you grow up?" They don't know what the hell they want to be when they grow up. You think they know it? Like, they don't know. They're still a baby, like they're still
Uh-huh.
going, like they've
Uh-huh.
been in a nest, like their whole life, 0 to 18, right? They don't know, they have no idea. But what's interesting is that when you ask them, well, I'm going to start to do this a lot more, is I want to ask them, what problem do you want to solve? you know
Mm.
what's interesting about that question is now someone's asking for them for help, right? And so if they're able to say, I really want to solve that problem, I feel very affiliated with that. Like for me, it was the problem of making my hometown to a city of innovation, or wanting the people from there, right, to be the
Mhm.
ones to help build the future of the city. That's what Pilot City is built on. And so when that, I I went 110% on that problem, right? Um, with If I were just doing it because I studied architecture, like I just went down architecture and I'm gonna build buildings, in St. Leandro. That doesn't inspire me to do anything, right? And so, asking people the what problems they want to solve. So for you, it seems like the problem that you wanted to solve was exactly what you mentioned. So could you just elaborate more on that? Like, what are the problems that you're solving, right, in your life that you have aspired to be while in YCS?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as a sober person, I see a lot of people still struggling with addiction, and especially my family members and my friends that I'm really close with, and it sucks, right? It sucks to see people that you love and care about suffer through this disease, right? And I have learned in my personal experience to stay sober through connection with other people, right? So there's like this the saying, like, stay in the middle of the herd, build a support group and whatnot, so that way you can talk to like-minded people that have similar struggles or issues or mindsets, whatever, that can help you persevere through whatever struggle you're going through. And so what I'm trying to get to is that the opposite of addiction or substance use, in my experience, I'm not an expert at all whatsoever in drugs and alcohol, and I'm not trying to like say like, this is the solution, but in my experience, it's been connection, right? And so the problem that I want to address or maybe help solve in the world in general is, how can we build connection with other people, right? A lot of times, at least for me, I don't know about anybody else in the world, but like me, I'm hearing a little bit of what you've gone through, right? But at least for me, my depression, my mental health issues, my substance use issues, my questioning of whether I was gay or not, like all those issues, I think would would have been easier for me to process if I was able to connect with someone and talk to someone about those issues, right? If there was an LGBTQ center in my hometown that was able to like, hey, I don't know what's going, but like go in and talk to someone about it. It was able to like, early on, talk openly about mental health and depression, anxiety, and PTSD and stuff that I was going through with someone that not only was a professional, but that looked like me, right? Like, it's one thing to go into a facility and have that courage to connect with a professional, but if I can walk in and see another Juan, or maybe see another Derek, or whatever, and feel comfortable with that person, I'm like, oh, okay, like this person knows what I'm going through or has maybe similar lived experiences that I have, and 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 that gives me hope. That gives me hope that whatever I'm struggling with, I can also persevere. And so if I can build a community where young people are able to connect, and not only, right, work on cool projects like the ones that we have planned, but really go deeper and be like, oh man, like we have so much in common besides our interest in entrepreneurship, besides our interest in helping our community, right? Like we have so much in common in our core values, right? And I think that is really cool.
Yeah, for sure. I'm thinking about this a lot, like, and it's interesting because it's all kind of boiled up since last year with the Black Lives Matter movements, and just it, just continue to chip away at this big iceberg, this big boulder, right? And we think about this, it really comes down to this. Well, it's definitely a systemic system, but it's also, people don't have the resources. I'm like looking at some of these families, that are in this area. It's like, geez, like there's it's not even about that, right? It's about the resource that students actually have or don't have, and the connection they have with their mom or dad or don't have, or the connection with their families that they do or don't have, right? It's like, or the connections with the people that the family members know that bring them resources or don't, right? Like there's all these, there's so many trees branches that get to where you need to get to the fruit, but there could be some trees where it's not even planted on good soil, you know
Hmm.
it's not even watered, it's not even in the right place, like in terms of like, where it naturally can thrive, and that's what's interesting about, this work that we're doing, is we're essentially looking to creatively help people, right, at a younger age, discover more of who they are so they can go out and be the best potential they can be, right? That's what it comes down to, right? So I'd like for you to do a baseline on YCS. Give people an understanding of what is we youth community service, and let people know exactly what it is and what programs you got, what offerings, tell us about the volunteer, kind of aspect and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. So youth. So first of all, I want to say that I am gravitated to the work that youth community service does, and I'll go into what we do because of the alignment and core values, right, that I just talked to you about. And so the youth community service was conceptualized to help to build connection among young people. It was established over 30 years ago. And back then, someone saw that there was this very like cultural divide, geographical divide between the cities of Palo Alto and East Palo Alto that was divided by the 101, right? And even still, like to be honest, you can still see the differences between like, oh, you're in East Palo Alto, you just drive over the bridge, and you're in a different world, right? Where trees are planted in really great soil, and there's also really great soil in East Palo Alto, right? That trees are not being planted at, right? Like so, it just hey, there's great quality soil over here too. It's just that no one's planting the trees over here, right? And so on the baseline is that's what youth community service does. It tries to build connections of young people and opportunity for young people across all areas, right? So geographics, culture, identity, right? Just nitty gritty, break down those barriers of like, what should divide us: male, female, gender, sex, race, ethnicity, and take that all out of the question and just like, we're all gonna be working together on this one specific project that we're both or all passionate about, right? Um, and we do that, and how we do that is by um, providing opportunities for young people to be of service, um, not only to themselves or for themselves, but to the community as well. And what I mean by that is that we have realized that people need as much support as possible, right? And with the idea with equity is that some people don't have the resources that other people do, right? And so how can I expect Derek to go and be of service to someone else when Derek is struggling with mental health and depression and whatnot, and is not functioning at 100% and only at 5%, right? And so the baseline for us is like, okay, we understand and see you, Derek, that you only are functioning at 5%. How can we support you to help you get to 20%, 50%, right? What is your comfortability, or what's your goal and personal goal on trying, like what's an achievable goal, right? And from there, linking Derek, with someone like a Juan that's maybe was at 0% and now is at 20%, right? Maybe I'm not at 100% yet, but then it's like, hey, like I was just at 0%, like last whatever, right? And I can like try to help you up, and us working together, we can potentially both get to 80% at the same time, you know. um, and then also working with youth to expose them to their passions, right, through service. So figuring out like, what are you passionate about? Are you passionate about animals or environment or social justice, or what is it that you're interested in? So our primary purpose is to provide opportunities for young people not only to work on themselves, like I said, by like life skills and emotional skills and social emotional skills and whatnot, but then once you feel good about yourself, whatever percentage you're at, whether you're at 20% or 100%, then now how can you help the community, right? So not only in East Palo Alto and Palo Alto, but like the Bay Area, right? And maybe grow and go work in somewhere else. We have alumni that have worked with YCS that now are in college and have graduated college and have moved away and are doing great work of being of service to their communities in like Louisiana and Chicago and in China now, right? And so and it's the fundamental basics that they learned going through one of our programs at YCS that taught them how to keep that balance of working on myself, not working with others, working on myself, working with others, and being able to realize that the law of abundance says that in order for me to keep what I have, I need to give it away, right? And so once I feel like I'm at 80%, how can I help
Mm.
you get at 80%? Oh, and then vice versa. There might be some times where like it ebbs and flows. So some of the programs that we do have and currently is a peer leadership education model. So what that is we recruit high school students to be their own peer leaders. And so we have a YCS staff member who's an adult, in college and whatnot, that does facilitate the program. But basically, the conversations, the topics, the issues, the projects that they are working on is fully facilitated by their peers. So they're the ones
Mm.
doing the research, the background, the analysis, whatever, to get the project done, and what have you. We also have service learning specific clubs at schools where either during lunch, well, not now, right, because of COVID, but and while we had in-person in-person school, kids will be able to go during lunch or after school to a campus and like work on like service projects, like really like come together and say like, hey, we're gonna have a food drive for Second Harvest Food Bank or for economical hunger program, whatever. And whatever their passion was, we would support in helping them find those resources. But like, hey, let me hook you up with a volunteer coordinator at this agency so that you guys can connect and make this project done or have this project complete. And then we also have programs for middle school students that focuses on academic support and social emotional health, and also teaching them the basic and fundamentals of service and what that looks like. So it's not as aggressive as the work that our high school peer leaders work looks like, but it's more of an introductory level of like, hey, like, even though you're in middle school, you can also be of service, even though you're like in that weird, age range where it's like you're not able to do stuff independently, but then you're, I don't know. So we also have that. And on the horizon, something that I'm very passionate about is expanding our program offerings to elementary school students. And so kind of going back to the originally what we were talking about is about, exposing youth to their passions, and their purpose and whatnot, teaching even younger kids, right? Like kindergarten, to up to middle school about, like asking those questions and not what do you want to be or who do you want to be when you grow up. It's like, what goal do you want to work on or what change do you want to make in the world, right?
Hmm.
And teaching young kids that you don't have to wait till you're out of college to start doing that or thinking about those questions, right? You can start thinking about that as a kid.
Yeah,
So
and we just had a conversation with Christian Sabralga with
hmm
Cool Line, and
hmm
he's like a perfect example of someone that you're describing.
yeah, he started his own nonprofit and he's still in high
Yeah, in
school.
ninth grade. Like he
Yeah.
he started nonprofit in ninth grade, and he started Cool Line when he was 9. It's ridiculous. Um, yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you on describing your programs. Did you want to elaborate further?
Yeah, and so with the Horizon movement, or that vision that I have, it's specifically for our upcoming summer program that we have coming up. So I specifically run our summer programming for students in the Bay Area. Um, It's called the Summer of Service. And what usually happens is we try to incorporate some fun aspects of service and with those deep, sometimes uncomfortable conversations that you and I feel comfortable having now, but young people need some facilitation and support, right? And so during our summer service program is we try to build those connections and build that camaraderie by with connecting youth to their peers across the Bay Area, and then going out to the world and making a difference by going to volunteer at soup kitchens and going to the VA and just kind of like chit chatting with the VA and playing bingo with them, and doing small stuff like that, right? It's not all about like going to a different country and building a city, right? It's you can do just small acts of service by like asking someone how they're doing, or sitting with them for 30 minutes and just like chit chatting and whatnot. And I think that's why this specific program for our summer is really popular, because eventually youth understand it's like, oh, cool, I don't have to try to build Rome in a day, right? It's a cliche, but I could start with just making a difference in one person's life.
Yeah, I want to dive into this kind of reciprocation thing, because it's a really interesting concept of work on yourself, give it back to others, right?
Mm-hmm.
Work on yourself, give back to others, right? I feel like at the end of the day, like you mentioned, like the fundamentals is you just feel a lot better when you give stuff to people, right? And you work on mentoring others, work on gaining them stuff, you work on you take your word, and actually execute on what you promised them. You help them out when they have a particular issue or they're processing some scenario, right? And I didn't know that factor about the programs you guys have are working on themselves while simultaneously working on others too, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where the value of this kind of volunteerism comes in, right? And the service to community. And so diving into that more now, so you guys have robust programs around community service, right? And sometimes a little too robust, to the point where you guys are busting at the seams and you're trying to figure out how to manage those infrastructures, right? To
Right.
get students the verified hours so they can also do their logistics and verify with their school. And I guess there is a variety of things going on, right? You're helping students build on themselves, and then you're allowing them to apply that with others with their new version of themselves, right? So they can be the better version of themselves to other people. And then they're feeling good about that, that then allows them to just understand more about themselves, to then say, oh, what other new thing can I do to advance the world, right? Well, I'm going to do this service now, right? And there's this reciprocation system. And then there's also like they need to verify that with schools, because sometimes schools need hours for volunteerism, right? So it's like this three-pronged kind of issue. So our project, I want to be able to kind of announce that, just so we can kind of break the ice on that one. And what we're asking for students to do is to automate the volunteer verification workflow between a student, their school, and partner organization, using tools like Zapier, which help automate tasks, as a prototype to develop a mobile app for youth community service. So tell us about your pains around volunteer management and why
Yeah.
a problem like this is necessary for the well-being of your organization.
Absolutely. And so, like you said, our workflow is all about community service and helping young people connect with agencies that offer these services, and then also being able to verify um, and authorize community service hours that were completed by a student. Sometimes, yes, it's students volunteer for a very practical reason, right? Like, yo, like I need 10 hours for this specific class. And so like YCS, like help me, right? And so
Right.
like, all right, Derek, like come, like I got you signed up for, the Palo Alto Humane Society. They'll give you 10 hours and you show up every week, whatever, right? This is the task. You do it, done. Cool, moving on. Sometimes we never see that student ever again because they got their 10 hours and whatnot. other instances, we have students who work with us, throughout the whole entire academic year, who are, very involved in everything that we do, right? So they wanted like the 10 hours, but they also want to go and be part of a youth panel, and also they want to like, they want to do everything, right? And so a challenge in the past, especially for YCS. And I think you mentioned that, a lot of nonprofits, don't have the bandwidth or the manpower of a corporate entity, right? And so youth community service is very, very small, but then also because we're so small, there aren't any processes or best practices in place that captures all of that information in one location. And for example, I could tell a volunteer like, hey, use this Google form to register for this specific volunteer service opportunity. And then another staff member could be like, oh, use this Excel sheet, right? I don't know why they would use Excel, but I'm just saying Excel, right? There it feels like every single time we're always trying to figure out the best practice of like, oh, what works best to capture like registries, and then capture like how many hours, and then maybe like send them to, and then also verify with the agency. And then, oh wow, like Derek came back to us 2 years later and it's like, hey, I did those 10 hours with you like 2 years ago for Palo Alto Humane Society, and I didn't see you ever again, but I lost that paper, I need that paper now. And we're like, I don't know where it's at, like and so there's all these different like obstacles that are not very easily accessible, I think, to anyone right now. So YCS as an agency would be great to be kind of like that place, that database where everything is stored, right? Where we could type in a search of Derek Lee, like, oh yeah, cool. So I see you that you volunteered at Palo Alto Humane Society 2 years ago. Here you go. Here's a receipt, or here's a copy of whatever, right? And here you go. You can now use it and verify whatever. Kind of like a DMV, right? You go to DMV and you get a copy of your driver's license from years and years ago. Like similar to that, it would be great for us to have something like that. Which right now, if you ask me about something that last year, I may have it, I may not have it, because it's somewhere in an Excel. I don't know. I don't know where it's at.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a disservice for us as an agency, but also to you as a student, and it's also a disservice to the agency that we sent you to, and then also disservice to, the school that wants you to do service for them or whatever, right? For a high school requirement. And then going back to that whole like figuring out the purpose and passions in young people's lives, I think what would be great for us to have is that reflection aspect, right? And because a lot of times you touched on the base of reciprocity of like, giving and getting. But there's a lot of times where we do all this work as individuals and we don't realize that, oh, I've done all this work for substance use prevention. Like I didn't even know that, right? Like looking back in my life, I'm like, oh wow, like I've been really heavily active in this specific, mission, and I had no idea. Now I could, like as a young person especially, could now like reflect on that and maybe build that into a career, or maybe even, go with and study that at school. I don't know, whatever they want to do with it, right? But like have that aspect to look back at what they did and somehow try to apply it to their future or to the community as a whole, right?
Yeah.
And right now, all of those different elements are getting lost through the cracks because there isn't a clear, easy process for us to capture all that information.
I now get why you just want a mobile app now, right? So you're talking about how all your team members have different mechanisms of how they verify hours, right? So that's like problem number one, right? It's not in a centralized location. People are doing it the way they want, and there's no record, basically, no clean record to come back to as a database of volunteerism that has occurred, right?
Right.
And to be able to verify and email the right people and get things coordinated and so forth. And then number two is, now that students have done all this volunteer work, right, in the community, they don't have some level of a public profile that says, hey, like, this is what I've done in terms of community service, right? At least with YCS, right?
Right.
So, and you're saying that that's helpful for yourselves, right? To be able to yes, share with people, that to allow those people to share what they've done in the community, right? Which makes, YCS look good, sure, but really it comes down to the student being able to say, look what I did, right? To like their employer perhaps cares about that, or maybe a college that they want to go to, or maybe a school that they want to go to after high school, and so there's this public record of verified hours, right, and verified community service that will to help benefit the student in their progression of their life, right? So there's those two
Correct.
aspects. So I'd like for you to break down how you guys currently do the volunteer verification. Like, just walk us through. I'm a student, you're the
Uh-huh.
verifier. Like,
Okay.
and I'm coming to you and say, hey, I want to get 10 hours, right? What do you do from there? How do you get from A to Z with this process now?
So
And
before I get to
this is gonna help, because then students will know what to digitize and how to
yeah.
build those automated connections on Zapier, and to be able to discover how they can optimize your flow.
So before we even get to A, there's like a one, like, I think, like a subcategory before you get to A, like, right, like, I want 10 hours, and then maybe your teacher's like, oh, go to YCS, and there isn't a clear, like, okay, I need to contact Juan, right, because he's at YCS. But I may be at one of your schools, or like know your principal or somebody. So maybe your principal's like, hey, I know this guy named Juan at YCS. Here's his email. Contact him, right? So now I'm working with you, right? So Derek and Juan are working together. You're the student. I'm the employee. However, luckily, like, we have really fantastic staff that could direct Derek to the correct person, right? Because we do work in, unfortunately, and this is a big unfortunately, and YCS knows my feelings about this. We do work in very geographical areas currently, right? So if you're a student at East Palo Alto Academy and you go to me, that's great, because that's one of the schools I work at. But if you happen to be a student at in San Lorenzo that comes to me, and I don't currently like work in San Lorenzo, maybe my coworker works in San Lorenzo, I may be taking you to a different path that isn't even like near where you need to be going, right? Like, I don't have those connections and whatnot. I could certainly try to make those connections for you, but I don't have those connections, right? Like, I really have strong connections with East Palo Alto. And so, first of all, that's like a huge, also, like, getting to A. It's like, I don't even know how to get an A, right? And there's a lot of like, hey, all right, let me get you to Juan, and Juan can help you, Derek, right? So once eventually you get to Juan, then I'm able to, like, all right, tell me, like, what, like, do an onboarding process of what you're interested in. Like, oh, I don't know, like, I think I need to do 10 hours and I don't really care. But my job is to try to, like, get to, like, the meat inside of, like, okay, like, what are you passionate about, like, or what maybe you'd be interested in, right? And if eventually you find that you're interested in animals, so then I hook you up with a animal shelter, and then you go into service with them. So I email the volunteer coordinator, like, hey, Linda, I'm going to send you Derek every Saturday for 2 hours for the next month, right, until he completes his 10 hours, and make the connection, and you're good to go, right? You do the service, you come back, you're like, hey, Juan, I completed the service. I'm like, cool, awesome. Let me email Linda and confirm that Derek did show up and did the 10 hours. She's like, yep, he showed up every single day. He was on time. He was great. Like, whatever. He's good to go. I'm like, cool, awesome. Now I'm able to email you, or whoever I need to email, either your teacher, your principal, and say, like, hey, Derek Lee completed 10 hours at the Humane Society or the animal shelter. And I'm verifying those hours today, which is February 18th, 2021, right? And that's just an email that I usually send out. Sometimes if a student really wants like an extra mile, like, hey, like, no, like an email is not sufficient, like I will actually make a certificate of completion of hours for Derek Lee. So like I like will like just send you a virtual certificate of like, yes, like I have verified Derek Lee has completed 10 hours of community service, and sign my name on it, and here you go. And now you do with it with whatever you want,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But that certificate is now also like in my email, or if I remember to save it, and I said this is an if, right?
Right.
And I should be saving it, which I do now, but like not everyone has that knowledge or that common sense, like, oh, maybe I should save this certificate for later in case
I do that
Derek.
all the time. I just keep it in the email. I'm like, oh man,
Yeah,
this is gonna get lost somewhere in life, somewhere.
exactly, right. And so that's how I usually go about things, you know. Also, you could just we have a very big event where, like, for example, we just had our Martin Luther King Jr. Day event back in January, where it's open to the public, and we just have this like mass registration on our website where you go and register. And especially now, because everything is virtual, it's not even in person, so I never even meet Derek Lee, right? Derek Lee registers for our events. And we have like the service activity that you can do at home, remotely, and then you complete it, and then you send it off to YCS, right? And sometimes Derek Lee sends his completed project to YCS with his name and address and everything, like all his information. And sometimes it's just a box, right? Like it's literally just a box with like no information of who or what, right? And so I have to open it up and be like, okay, cool, yes, that's a project. Who do I give credit to, right? And then Derek is at home waiting for his verification of hours that he spent 10 hours creating this box, and I have no idea that you even registered because you know it's in the registration list, but I can't, like verify this box to Derek Lee with, it just, there's no way for me to verify that.
Yeah.
And so that's a different way that someone in the universe could potentially, work with us and have no idea that I'm working with you.
Yes. Okay. So getting to A is one problem, right? Essentially, to even have students interested in volunteering, right? Well, for whatever reason, right? For them to even get to the right person, right? That's like number one. And then
Yeah.
number two is when you've got them connected, then you got to direct them towards the right people internally if they need to be redirected, right? And when they're in touch with the person they need to be in touch with, then they know the inventory of opportunities, and the student are providing like a profile of information or interests or things that they care about, just so that the person connecting them know what to match them with, right? So there's
Right.
a fill up, a give your interest somehow kind of system. Here's an inventory of stuff, and then there's like a manual matching process, right, that occurs between the youth and the inventory of opportunities. And then they say, boom, you're matched and you're scheduled. Now you just got to show up, right? Or make things happen, with the organization, whether it's in person, digital, whatever. And I say, cool, got a calendar invite, maybe, right? Or something that says, hey, this is date and time, come, right? And you're added to it, and here's a reminder, right? And you get to that activity or event or experience that they're going to come and volunteer at, and then they say, cool, check in, right? It's like check in somewhere, right? Like to say that you arrive. There's a liaison probably that they need to talk to right before they get started with the work, and then that person, tells them what to do, or what the agenda is for the day, or what they're responsible for, or this is training them on a task that they have to do or whatever, right? And then they do those tasks, right? And all that's untracked, right? It's all just kind of like, oh, go do things, and then somehow at the end of that day or at the end of that activity, they check out, right? Somehow, with the same liaison typically, right? Or maybe not, it gets messy, right? And then they check out with that person, whoever that may be, same liaison or not. And then there needs to be some kind of trigger that then lets YCS know that this has been verified by the partner organization that will offer the volunteer hours. And then you verify it, and then you say, okay, you're good. Like, here's an email, right? Saying you did it, right? And maybe sometimes the youth is like, what's this? Give me a certificate of completion, right? And so then you say, okay, well, let me pull up this file that I have to edit now, and then I'm going to, and then here, have fun, right? And then you never see that certificate again, right? Or that kid
Right.
again, in some cases, right? And that's it, right? That's what you're looking to automate.
Yeah, yeah. Like the way that I'm laughing because the way that you're, it just sounds very, very like, it makes me cringe.
Well, what's interesting is that that's the best way to do it anyways, right? Like manually,
Yeah.
that because I did volunteer when I was in Interact and stuff, so I kind of know how these things go. But like, and I've done stuff when I was an adult, but like, I'm just coming out of like what the typical process is. Like, I think volunteer organizations that coordinate volunteering, right, in general, they all experience this issue, right? It may be more simple when you're the partnering organization, because you just are in your box of what you're doing, and then YCS like, oh, here's a kid, and you're like, okay, cool, do this, and then they say, okay, check it out when you're done. Okay, checked out. Okay, cool, see you later. Like, that partner organization is kind of simple, right? And the school's kind of simple too, right? Because the school's kind of just like, hey, get hours, right? and then somehow the student comes back and is like, here's my hours, and like, okay, cool, check, that's it, right? And then, or like, hey, give me a signed copy somewhere, or someone give me proof, right? And then and you need to give them proof. So the people organizing it, right, the whole thing, that's the complex part, right? So it's a unique scenario anyways, right? And what's interesting is that the student's experience is probably terrible, right? So it's terrible for you guys, right? But then it's also terrible for the student, because they have to actually go through all these loops and hurdles just to get this all kind of there, right? But they wish that there's something simpler, right, that guides them, and they know what to expect, right, through the process. And it becomes just like, enter this way, and this email, spreadsheet, automation, quarterbacking system will tell you what the next step is at every moment, so that manually, you and your team don't have to manually take them on that journey, right? There's already automated communication systems, right, that take them from pre-A to whatever, F or
To
D
Z. Yeah.
or Z, the whole thing. And
Yes.
that's about
Absolutely.
right, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Like it would be great for, a student, directly to go to the YCS mobile app, or to like our web, whatever, and be like, cool, awesome, I'm gonna sign up. Then you get a notification, this is the next step. You finish that, check, great, this is the next step, right? And then literally walk you through it. And at any process throughout the process, if you have any questions, then yes, you could talk to a Juan or to another staff member, be like, hey, I have a question about this, right? But most of it could be automated and could be streamlined, and so that it's a no-brainer, and it's like super user friendly.
Yeah. So let me break it down, because there's a gap, because you don't really know what Zapier, like you never use Zapier as much, right? So it's something that we proposed. So let me kind of break it down for the student who's watching this, who's in your program. So so there is a value in building a mobile application here, right? Because it's a display system of certified hours. It can manage the process potentially. It can do a variety of different things, right? I think people can take pictures, of their work, right? Document what they've done, they actually did, right, that day, or take picture of the manual registration form, the paper sign up form. You can do a variety of things there, right? But since YCS doesn't have technical capabilities at the moment for development of apps, right? It's a good practice to kind of get started on more of the business logic side without coding just yet, but the goal is to have a technical capacity and to have systems like an IT person, right, who knows how to code and that's actually managing an application that then can make your lives easier, right? So to get to the point where you guys are able to justify or have the capability, not justify is already done, but the capability, right, of having an application on your, as a function in your team, right? Having this kind of logic-based app called Zapier.com, right? Or ifttt.com is also another example, but these automation workflow apps, right? To essentially digitize that A to Z, right? Pre-A to Z, right? As much as possible, right? So in Zapier, it's basically based on two things. It's basically why the competitor is called IFTTT is because IFTTT stands for if this then that, right?
Mm.
So if, right, a student checks in, right, to an opportunity, then send, right, Juan an email saying that Derek has checked in, right? Or when Derek has checked in, populate this spreadsheet with a checked in word. You can do that on Zapier. So you can have it say when someone's checked in, it's populating an Excel sheet, and when they check out, you populate the other column, right? And then when those two things, so then you can say as another zap, right, is when Derek has checked in and checked out, send this person an email saying this person's finished, right? And then send automatically to this email associated with this person, their school, that they have checked in, checked out, and they're done with their work. And then also send like a form to sign, right? By the person to then do another zap, which is to then, when it's signed somehow, right, you input it into something, and then that's the if, right? So if this file is uploaded, right, send to this person, right, a certificate of a completion, right, or send these people a certificate of completion. And then when that's done, then log everything that just happened into this Excel sheet, right? So you could do all that with Zapier. And that's why I recommend it, is because it's going to help you. And also it won't be as heavy of a lift, right, than developing a mobile application, which is a whole nother area and territory, right, of development. So that's what essentially students are doing, what I imagine students doing, right, for this particular project. Now, what we need at this point is two things. Number one, we need students to learn Zapier.com, which is actually kind of fun if you like organization, coordination, all that stuff, right? So learning those tools, going on YouTube, watching content, all that stuff, because Juan most likely can't help you to actually train you how to use Zapier, right? But you can learn yourself basically because you're a digital native. And then, but what they need from YCS is what everything you just mentioned in ideally like a more in a written way, or some like some website, something that they can see in our program that says, okay, and they can reference, say, okay, this is the process that I'm digitizing. Zap for this, zap for that, zap for that, zap for that. And I'm going to link them all together and make that a whole workflow, right? And then deliver that whole workflow essentially, right, in an account that they built it in or something like that, with a password that's temporary. I don't know, something like along that line. So I just want to confirm with you, does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. If we could get something like that completed, it would make the work that YCS does like 10 times, like, I don't know, like it just, I think we will all be happy with that result.
Okay. And then the goal, right, is to have, people who are technically oriented and perhaps even knows how to code or knows how to do some of that. So that what they just created with the Zapier can be potentially turned into a next level, right? Which is maybe not the automation of the business part, but the management and tracking part, right, of the actual experience, right, or the service. So the goal is to get to the point of building an application, but having the business workflow first before the technical workflow, right?
Yes.
So I think we've covered a lot of ground here. Pretty A to Z here as well. So anything else you want to share about the challenges or the specifications or things that you'd require, or anything else that you'd like to share as a parameter?
Not as parameter, but I just as to echo what you're saying is that um, yes, this specific project will be the foundation for work to be done, continuously, even over time, right? It is like developing the eventual app that YCS wants to create takes a lot of work. And so the work that these students, do will help YCS greatly achieve to the end goal of eventually creating an app. And so if it doesn't sound sexy, or if it doesn't sound like, oh, like I really want to be part of that app, project, that's like, you are like, you're building that foundation and that, that footwork for us to eventually, get to those steps. But there's some steps that we need to take before we take that huge jump.
Yeah, for sure. In going through with Pod City, our software development cycles, I kind of just wanted to say, hey, let's create an app too, right? But I didn't realize there was a lot of factors to creating an app, especially the person who knows how to do it, right, and who can lead it on a more full-time basis, because there's management of those databases and management of bugs. When bugs occur, it's very frustrating. You need someone to squash those bugs, right, on the app, especially when it's first being developed as well. So it's definitely something that you also have to fundraise for and get funding for, to fund a developer, right, who can do it, responsibly, as opposed to, working for a tech company that already can pay them 130 grand, right, as a starting, right. So
Right.
there's a lot of factors there to kind of build up towards. And I would argue that Zapier is also very fun. It's actually kind of an interesting, sexy thing. There's been a lot of tools around automation workflows that have been occurring. A lot of people have been picking up on it because they know that a lot of people can't code, right, or don't know how to build a capabilities of learning how to code, but need to automate a certain task like immediately, right? So that's why Zapier exists, and IFTT and all these automation workflow systems, is so that it actually, because things have gotten easier with technology over time, like, and the reason being is because you don't have to code as much. You can build out a profile. You can just go on this app and do this. You don't need it does the app, the developers on the app did all the hard part for you. And that's why technology, in my opinion, is a very powerful tool, is because it's making our lives easier in general, right? Or making it more accessible, making ourselves more powerful. And it's basically magic, right? That's how I call what I call coding is magic. You're typing a bunch of stuff, right, on a document. That stuff you typed does things. It's crazy. It's really nuts. So and those things that you code can create things that people don't have to code, right, which is even more meta, right? And so there's a lot of cool things that I think this is going to lead up towards. So very excited about this project. And one last question, what's the jurisdictions of youth community service? Because I wasn't aware that it was only in East Palo Alto.
Well, to clarify, it's in East Palo Alto and Palo Alto. And our summer program's actually open to everyone. But a lot of our school-based programs are at specific schools. And currently we work with both Palo Alto Unified School District and Sequoia Union High School District in the high school level. And for younger, we work with Ravenswood City School Districts as well. And so currently just those districts when we have like academic year school-based programs, and we're looking to expand, to, the South Bay and even East Bay and the, North Peninsula. But other programs or like events like our one-offs, like our MLK Day events or our special, like, volunteer events, those are intergenerational, which means like it's open to everybody, right? So, Derek Lee and your family can come and like volunteer, and like, Juan can come and volunteer with his family, and grandma, grandpa, like,
Huh.
brother, sister can come. Um, but yes, most of the programs is for youth in Palo Alto and East Palo Alto.
Good to know. Okay, I want to clarify that because that shows the opportunity, right, for this workflow to have more scalability, so that you can actually have more
Right.
capacity to then deliver outside of the particular areas and do community service in other areas too, and also builds the case for the mobile app too, because mobile apps apps are designed to be scalable. So that's the good part. It builds new legs, right, that you can use. So I'm gonna end it here. And we had a really good talk here, and we went through life stories to technical workflows. And the reason
Yeah.
why we're in all those things. So really appreciate the conversation, Juan, and yeah, look forward to this project. Any last parting advice for students who are doing this project, who are watching this right now, that and they're about to ID and get started with the project, but any last parting advice for them before they go on their journeys?
Yeah, absolutely. Have fun. I have had nothing but fun throughout this whole entire process, working with Pilot City, and have fun with it. Be creative, use your juju juice or whatever to um, make whatever you feel like you want to make it happen.
Great advice. Yeah, and that's exactly why we're doing these podcasts too. Is we want to have fun too. We want to just talk to employers, say, hey, where are you coming from with this?
Hmm.
So absolutely great advice. That is it. Thank you, Juan, for coming, and we'll talk to you soon. We'll have you stay back for just a little moment.